Daniel Reed woke up to loud knocking that didn't belong in the stillness of dawn. It wasn't gentle or patient. It was urgent, desperate. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Then the knocking came again, sharper this time, followed by a trembling voice. "Daniel, please open the door." He recognized it instantly. Mrs. Linton, his neighbor from down the hall. She was in her late 60s, quiet, polite, the kind of person who smiled at everyone but never pried. He couldn't imagine her standing outside anyone's door at 5 a.m. He threw on a shirt and opened the door. Her robe was half-tied, her hair loose, eyes wide and filled with fear. "Don't go to work today," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Just trust me." Before he could ask anything, she turned and hurried back to her apartment. The door shut fast behind her. He heard the chain lock click. Daniel stood there frozen. The hallway light flickered once, humming softly. He stared at her door, then at the dark window at the end of the corridor, wondering what on earth had just happened. He looked at the clock on his phone to 5:03 a.m. Too early for sense. Too strange for coincidence. He rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe she'd mixed him up with someone else. But no, she'd looked straight at him. The fear in her voice was real. He closed his door slowly, leaning against it for a second. "Don't go to work today." He said it out loud, trying to understand it. Why not go to work? He had a presentation that morning, a big one. He'd spent weeks preparing it, fine-tuning every number, every chart. It was supposed to be his chance to prove himself after being overlooked for a promotion. The promotion that went to Ethan Crow. Just thinking the name made his jaw tighten. Ethan, the man who smiled too easily, who spoke like every word he said was a gift, who called Daniel his right-hand guy while stealing everything he built. Daniel had trusted him once. They'd started together at Harlan Industries, two fresh graduates chasing the same dream. But ambition had a funny way of turning friendship into something else. Ethan had taken Daniel's project, months of research, and pitched it to their boss as his own. He'd even used Daniel's notes. When Daniel found out, he'd confronted him quietly in the break room, away from others. Ethan hadn't denied it. He just smiled and said, "That's how the game's played. Dane, don't take it personal." And when the promotion came, Ethan's name on the announcement, his hand shaking Daniel's in fake sympathy. Something inside Daniel broke. He didn't report it. He didn't argue. He just went silent. But silence had a way of turning into something heavy, something sharp. And now, out of nowhere, Mrs. Linton's warning echoed through that silence like a bell he couldn't ignore. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the coffee machine while the morning light crept through the blinds. His mind kept circling the same question. What could she possibly know? Mrs. Linton lived alone. Her husband had passed years ago. She rarely talked to anyone except when she was watering her plants in the hallway. Maybe she had one of her bad dreams again. He'd heard from another neighbor that she sometimes woke up frightened after her son's death last year. Still, the way she'd said it, trust me, it wasn't confusion. It was certainty. Daniel sighed and picked up his phone. His thumb hovered over the company number. He could call in late, maybe even take a day off. He hadn't missed a single day in 7 years. He didn't know why, but the thought of walking into that building suddenly felt wrong. Heavy. He typed a message to his supervisor, not feeling well. Won't be in today. A few minutes later, the message was marked read. No reply. That was fine. He turned off his phone, made coffee, and sat by the window. Outside, the city was still half asleep, the streets pale and empty. He tried to focus on the steam rising from his mug, But his thoughts kept drifting to Ethan, to the stolen project, to the easy confidence in that man's smile. Ethan was the type who always landed on his feet. Charming, fearless, a master of twisting truth into something that suited him. The company adored him. The board called him a visionary. Daniel used to admire him too. Before admiration turned to disgust, he thought about all the times he'd stayed late fixing Ethan's mistakes, cleaning up his reports, making him look good. He'd believed loyalty meant something. But loyalty was just a currency. Ethan didn't care to spend . Now Daniel sat there, the sun slowly rising, realizing he'd built a ladder for someone else to climb. The sound of sirens snapped him from his thoughts. He turned toward the street. An ambulance sped past. Then another. The sound grew louder, sharper, until it seemed to echo off every building in the block. He frowned, setting his mug down. Sirens weren't unusual, but this many, this fast. Something had happened. He reached for his phone again, turning it back on. Notifications poured in immediately. Missed calls, group messages from coworkers. His stomach dropped as he read the first one. Explosion at Harlan HQ. Are you okay? His breath caught. He opened another message. Ethan's lab caught fire. Whole floors gone. People trapped. Daniel's hands went cold. He turned on the TV. The first channel he landed on was showing it. His office building, the place he should have been sitting in right now, engulfed in flames. Smoke curled into the sky like a black ribbon. The anchor's voice was calm but grave. Early reports suggest a chemical reaction caused the explosion at Harlan Industries research wing. Several injuries confirmed. 2 fatalities reported so far. Daniel couldn't breathe. He stared at the screen, his own reflection faintly visible over the chaos on TV. He should have been there. He would have been there. The meeting, the presentation, all of it was scheduled for that floor. His office was right beside the lab. Mrs. Linton's words hit him again, this time like a hammer. Don't go to work today. Just trust me. He sank into the chair, every muscle trembling. His phone buzzed again. More messages, co-workers asking if he was alive. He could barely type a reply. I'm home. I'm safe. The word didn't feel real. He turned the volume up as the camera zoomed in on the wreckage. A name flashed on the screen. Ethan Crow. Senior Project Director. Injured in explosion. Condition critical. Daniel's heart skipped. Ethan. The man who had taken everything from him. He didn't know what to feel. Shock, guilt, confusion, all tangled together. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. His mind kept repeating the same impossible question. How did Mrs. Linton know? He waited until the evening before leaving his apartment. The air smelled faintly of smoke, even from miles away. He walked down the hall and stopped at her door. He hesitated before knocking softly. It opened almost immediately. Mrs. Linton stood there, pale and tired, as if she'd been waiting for him. You stayed home, she said quietly. Good. He nodded, still breathless. How did you know? Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, she said nothing. Then she looked past him, down the hall, and whispered, Because I couldn't lose another one. Daniel frowned. Another what? Another innocent man to that company, she said. My son, he worked there last year. Security division. He tried to warn them about safety violations in that same lab. Ethan Crow blamed him for a breach, got him fired, destroyed his career. He couldn't take it. She stopped, voice breaking. He took his own life 3 months ago. Daniel felt a chill run through him. She looked at him with trembling hands, holding onto the doorframe for balance. Before he died, He told me something terrible. He said Ethan had been hiding evidence of a chemical instability in one of the compounds your team was testing. He said it would cause a fire if mixed wrong. He sent me the report, but no one listened. Her voice softened. I tried to warn them. No one cared. Last night, I had this feeling, this awful certainty. I woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't breathe. I remembered what my son said. I remembered your name from his old work files. I couldn't let you go there today. Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to thank her, to comfort her, to say something, but no words came. All he could do was stand there, staring at the woman who had just saved his life because of a pain that had already ruined hers. Mrs. Linton gave a sad smile. Now you understand, she said softly. Trust isn't about knowing everything. It's about listening when your soul says something's wrong. She closed the door gently. Daniel walked back to his apartment, his body heavy, his thoughts spinning. The smell of smoke seemed stronger now, as if the fire had followed him home. He looked at his phone again, scrolling through news updates. Ethan was alive. Badly burned, but alive. Daniel sat in silence, the TV flashing images of the man who had once betrayed him. He didn't know whether to feel relief or rage. The company would probably spin the story, say it was an accident, a tragedy no one could have predicted. But he knew the truth now. Ethan's lies had destroyed Mrs. Linton's son. And today they almost destroyed him too. Daniel stared at the screen, at the flames swallowing everything Ethan had built on deceit. Something inside him shifted. Not quite hatred, not quite forgiveness. Something colder. He didn't say a word, but deep down, a decision began to take shape. Whatever Ethan had done to climb higher, Daniel would make sure the fall was harder. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel Reed felt completely, painfully awake. The next morning, Daniel woke up to a world that felt unfamiliar. The news still played quietly from the television. Shots of black smoke, flashing sirens, and the company logo he once felt proud to represent now burned into a symbol of tragedy. The headlines hadn't changed. Explosion at Harlan Industries. Investigation underway. He sat at the edge of his bed, half-dressed, staring at the screen. The faces of his co-workers appeared one by one, some injured, some still missing. Ethan Crow's name was mentioned again. In stable condition, the reporter said. Recovering from severe burns. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to feel relief, but something darker crept in, a strange satisfaction he didn't want to admit. Ethan had built his success on lies, and now the lies had caught fire. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages poured in, people checking on him, reporters asking for statements. Company alerts saying operations were temporarily suspended. None of it mattered. He just wanted quiet. But peace didn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mrs. Linton's face. Pale, desperate, whispering, "Don't go to work today." How could she have known? Her story from the night before kept replaying in his mind. Her son's death, the hidden safety reports, the cover-up. It all made sense now. Ethan's charm, his arrogance, his vision. It was all built on cutting corners and taking risks no one else dared to take. Daniel opened his laptop. He had copies of emails from months ago. Things that hadn't seemed important then. Reports flagged for safety concerns, ignored by Ethan. Complaints from lab technicians. Everything had been dismissed as minor. But together, it painted a different picture. A dangerous one. He started saving them into a folder, labeling it truth. For hours he sat in silence, scrolling through old files, reading conversations that made his blood run cold. Ethan had known about the faulty chemical compound. He'd even mocked a junior chemist for being too cautious. Daniel leaned back, running a hand through his hair. The pieces fit too perfectly. The company had covered it up. Ethan had taken the credit, and innocent people had paid the price. He felt sick. He'd worked under Ethan for years, trusting him, believing the man was just ambitious, not ruthless. But now, looking at those emails, Daniel saw it clearly. Ethan didn't care who got hurt, as long as he came out clean. A knock at the door made him jump. He opened it to find Mrs. Linton again. She looked calm this time, a small bag in her hand. "I made you some soup," she said quietly. "You probably haven't eaten." He tried to thank her, but she waved it off. "You don't owe me anything, Daniel. Just be careful." He frowned. "Careful of what?" "Of the truth," she said. "It's powerful, but it can destroy you if you don't use it right." She handed him the bag and turned to leave. Before she walked away, she added softly, "My son wanted to expose them too, but he didn't live long enough to finish it." Her words stayed with him long after she was gone. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The city outside was quiet, but inside him, everything felt loud. Thoughts, memories, anger. He opened his laptop again. He watched a live press conference. The CEO of Harlan Industries stood at a podium, expressing sympathy, promising a full investigation. Ethan's name wasn't mentioned at all. Daniel's stomach turned. The company was already rewriting the story. He opened social media, dozens of posts about Ethan being a victim, a hero who tried to stop the fire. Daniel almost laughed. The man who caused it was now being called brave. He couldn't take it anymore. He shut the laptop and stared at the ceiling. Mrs. Linton had been right. Truth was dangerous. But lies were poison. He thought about her son, about the young man who had tried to do the right thing and lost everything. Daniel wasn't going to let that happen again. The next morning, he dressed quietly and went for a walk. The world looked normal again. Kids going to school, coffee shops opening, people rushing to work. But Daniel felt separate from it all, like he was watching a movie he no longer belonged in. When he reached the corner newsstand, he saw Ethan's face on the front page. Engineer injured in workplace explosion, vows to return stronger. He bought the paper, read the first few lines, then tore it in half. That night, he opened his laptop again and began digging deeper. He wasn't looking for revenge anymore. He was looking for justice. But justice, he learned quickly, wasn't easy. The company's internal systems were locked down. The files he could access were limited. Still, he remembered something, an old backup drive he'd used for his projects. He found it at the back of a drawer, dusty but intact. When he plugged it in, the screen lit up with folders labeled prototypes, reports, lab notes. He clicked one. His old proposal opened. The one Ethan had stolen. The timestamps were still there. Proof that Daniel had written it first. Proof that Ethan had lied. He sat there, staring at the screen. This wasn't just about the explosion anymore. This was about years of manipulation, betrayal, and deceit. He copied everything. Every email, every document that tied Ethan to the cover-up onto a new flash drive. When he was done, he sat back and exhaled. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of control. The next morning, he visited the hospital. Ethan was in the ICU, his face bandaged, his body covered in burns. When Daniel saw him through the glass, he didn't feel pity. He felt clarity. He walked to the nurse's desk and asked if visitors were allowed. She shook her head. Family only. Daniel nodded and turned to leave. But before he reached the door, he heard a voice behind him. Faint but familiar. "Daniel." He froze. Ethan's voice, weak and rasped, came from the room. The nurse stepped aside. Daniel turned slowly. Ethan's eyes were half open, bloodshot but sharp. "You're alive." Daniel walked closer. "Thanks to someone who warned me." Ethan gave a crypt smile. "Lucky you. Wrong place, right time." "Wrong place?" Daniel said. "It was your lab that exploded." Ethan's smile faded. "It wasn't my fault. I told them the chemicals weren't stable. The company ignored me." Daniel stared at him. Even now, lying half dead, Ethan was rewriting history. "You're still lying," he said quietly. Ethan coughed, his voice hoarse. "You think you know everything? You don't. This company's dirtier than you can imagine. Don't play hero, Daniel. You'll get burned too." Daniel leaned closer. "You already burned everyone else." Ethan's gaze darkened, but he didn't respond. Daniel turned to leave, but before he reached the door, Ethan spoke again. "You think you're better than me? You're not. You just didn't have the guts to play the game." Daniel stopped, his fists tightening. For a moment, he wanted to say something cruel, but he didn't. He just looked at him, the man who'd built his life on lies, and said softly, "Games have rules. You broke them." Then he walked out. Back home, Daniel uploaded the evidence to a secure drive. He knew he couldn't send it anonymously. It would be dismissed. He needed to do it right. He started drafting an email to the media, attaching files one by one. Lab reports, memos, project blueprints, timestamp documents. But before he hit send, he hesitated. Mrs. Linton's words echoed in his mind. "Be careful with the truth." He wondered what she meant. Would this really bring peace? Or would it destroy more lives? He looked at Ethan's name on the screen. The man had almost killed him, had ruined others, and still called himself innocent. No, silence wasn't peace. It was surrender. He hit send. Within hours, his inbox filled with replies. Reporters wanted interviews, confirmation, statements. The story spread faster than he expected. By evening, it was everywhere. Headlines, social feeds, breaking news alerts. Insider exposes corruption behind Harlan explosion. Evidence links senior executive to safety negligence. Daniel sat in the dark, the glow of the TV flickering across his face. Ethan's image was gone now, replaced by words like investigation, criminal charges, liability. He thought he'd feel proud, but all he felt was empty. His phone rang. An unknown number. He didn't answer. A few minutes later, another call came, then another. Reporters. Lawyers. He turned the phone off and stared out the window. The night was quiet again. Too quiet. Then came a knock on the door. Slow. Careful. He opened it and found an envelope taped to the handle. No name, no address. Inside, a single note written in delicate, looping handwriting. Revenge brings fire. Truth brings smoke. You can't breathe in either for long. He recognized the writing. Mrs. Linton. Daniel sank into a chair, the letter trembling in his hand. He thought exposing the truth would fix things, bring justice, maybe even closure. But now, sitting there, he realized something bitter. Revenge, even when disguised as righteousness, still burned the one who held the match. He looked at the TV again. The company he'd given his life to was collapsing. Ethan's career was finished. But somehow, Daniel didn't feel like he'd won. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen, tired eyes, heavy heart, and whispered, "You were right." Outside, the city kept moving. Lights flickered, cars passed. People laughed somewhere below. Life went on, uncaring. Daniel closed the letter and placed it beside the flash drive. Then he turned off the lights, sat in the dark, and listened to the silence he had created. The silence that now belonged to him. 2 months passed, but Daniel's world hadn't returned to normal. The story he'd leaked had exploded just as fast as the fire that started it all. Harlan Industries was in chaos. The CEO resigned, the board faced lawsuits, and Ethan Crow became the face of corporate greed and deception. Reporters called it the biggest industrial scandal of the decade. Everyone wanted to know who the whistleblower was, but Daniel stayed silent. He'd done what he thought was right. The truth was out. Justice, in a way, had been served. But peace never came. Each morning he woke before dawn, like his body hadn't caught up to the fact that he didn't work there anymore. He'd stare at the sunrise through the same blinds, wondering if he'd gone too far or not far enough. The silence of his apartment no longer comforted him. It echoed. It reminded him of the nights when he'd stayed late at the office, dreaming of success, believing that effort mattered. Now, all he had was time, and the memory of how quickly everything could collapse. He thought often about Mrs. Linton. He hadn't seen her since the night he received her letter. The building manager said she'd moved out suddenly, no notice, no forwarding address. Sometimes, Daniel would pause outside her empty door, staring at the faint outline where her nameplate used to be. He owed her everything. His life, his clarity, his second chance. But he couldn't even thank her properly. Then one afternoon, a new message appeared in his inbox. No name, no greeting. Just a link and 5 words. You should see this today. Daniel hesitated, his pulse quickening. The link led to a local news site, a live press conference. Ethan Crow, thinner now, sat before cameras, his face partially healed, his tone humble and broken. I made mistakes, Ethan said. But I didn't act alone. The company failed us all. I was following orders. The real culprits are still out there. Daniel's jaw tightened. Even now, Ethan couldn't take responsibility. He wasn't confessing. He was shifting blame. The reporter asked, Are you suggesting you were framed? Ethan gave a slow nod. Yes, the man who leaked those files, he twisted them. He wanted revenge. I won't name him, but he knows who he is. Daniel froze. The words hit like a cold wave. Ethan was turning the story upside down, painting himself as the victim and Daniel as the villain. He leaned back, staring at the screen, anger boiling quietly. He'd risked everything to expose the truth, and now the same man who caused all this was trying to twist it again. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He paced the apartment, reading every comment on the news article. Some people were starting to believe Ethan. Others defended the whistleblower, whoever he was. The world was dividing again. Truth versus manipulation. Justice versus spin. Daniel felt something inside him stir. Not guilt, not fear, but resolve. He had proof. Hard proof. Ethan wasn't going to rewrite the story again. He opened his laptop, accessed the original files he'd sent to the media, and found the ones he'd kept hidden. Personal emails between Ethan and the board. Messages that showed clear intent to hide evidence and silence complaints. He'd held them back before, because they mentioned people who weren't directly responsible, people who might lose their jobs unfairly. But Ethan had crossed the line again. Daniel drafted another message, attaching the rest of the evidence. This time, he sent it to a smaller, independent news outlet, one that didn't twist stories for attention. Then, without hesitation, he pressed send. 2 days later, it was everywhere again. New leaks reveal Ethan Crow ordered data deletions before explosion. Whistleblower documents confirm negligence, fraud, and tampering. The news hit harder this time. Ethan's comeback crumbled overnight. The company cut all ties with him. Investigators reopened the case. He was summoned to court for questioning. Daniel watched from home. silent. He thought it would feel like victory. But it didn't. It just felt quiet, the same heavy, aching quiet that had followed him since that morning when Mrs. Linton knocked on his door. When Ethan appeared in court weeks later, he looked like a man hollowed out. Reporters crowded him, cameras flashing, but there was no confidence left in his eyes. Just exhaustion. As Daniel watched, he realized something strange. He didn't hate him anymore. He pitied him. Ethan had built his entire life around success, image, and power. And now all of it was gone. There was nothing left for him to fight for. That night, Daniel sat on his balcony, watching the city lights blink in the distance. He thought about the cost of truth. It had taken everything from both of them. Their careers, their peace, their sense of who they were. The next morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping. A small column tucked at the bottom of the page. Former Harlan executive found dead in apartment. No signs of foul play. Daniel stared at it for a long time. It didn't say Ethan, but it didn't have to. He knew. He set the paper down, his mind blank. There was no anger, no satisfaction. Just stillness. He went for a walk. The streets were busy, full of noise and movement, but he felt distant from it all. Every face looked familiar and strange at the same time. People rushing somewhere, chasing something, just as he once had. When he returned home, the answering machine light was blinking. He pressed play. It was Mrs. Linton's voice. "Daniel, if you're hearing this, it means things have gone as they were meant to. My son always said the truth has its own timing. I hope you found peace, but don't forget, revenge only ends one story. It doesn't heal the wound." Her voice cracked near the end. "Please, don't let anger live where life still can." Then the message ended. Daniel sat there for a long time, the weight of everything sinking in. The fire, the lies, the choices. He had exposed the truth. But at what cost? The company was finished, Ethan was gone, and Mrs. Linton had vanished like a shadow. All that remained was him, alive, but carrying the silence of everyone who wasn't. He turned off the lights and sat in the dark. Images flashed through his mind. Ethan's smile at the promotion party, the stolen project, the explosion, Mrs. Linton's trembling hands. Every moment that led here was built on decisions. Some selfish, some desperate, all irreversible. For the first time, Daniel understood what she meant when she said truth can destroy you if you don't use it right. He hadn't wanted revenge at first, only fairness. But the line between the two had blurred somewhere along the way. He'd gotten justice, yes, but it had come wrapped in ashes. Days turned into weeks. The world moved on, as it always does. The media found new scandals, new stories to chase. Daniel rarely went out anymore. He started painting again, something he hadn't done in years. Simple things. Mountains, oceans, empty roads. It helped. In small ways. One evening, while sorting through old papers, he found Mrs. Linton's first note, the one she'd slipped under his door the morning of the explosion. The handwriting was hurried but steady. "Don't go to work today. Just trust me." He smiled faintly. That single act, her warning, had saved his life and changed everything. She had lost her son to deceit and still found it in her heart to protect someone else. Daniel pinned the note to his wall, next to one of his paintings. It was a reminder that good and evil, revenge and mercy, often live closer together than people realized. He poured himself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt calm. Maybe Mrs. Linton was right. Maybe some stories weren't about victory or defeat. Maybe they were about learning when to stop fighting Dot as night deepened. Daniel opened his laptop and started writing. Not an email, not another leak, but a confession, a story. His story. He didn't use names. He didn't mention revenge. He wrote about choices, about what happens when ambition blinds people, and about how truth, once revealed, doesn't always set you free. Sometimes, it just shows you the weight you've been carrying. When he finished, he uploaded it anonymously. He didn't want credit. He just wanted someone, somewhere, to read it and understand. That night, as he turned off the light, a quiet peace finally settled in his chest. He didn't forgive Ethan, but he forgave himself. He'd spent so long trying to make the world see the truth that he'd forgotten to see his own. The next morning, sunlight filled the room, soft and golden. Daniel stood by the window, sipping his tea, watching people heading to work, laughing, talking, living. For the first time, he didn't feel left behind. He felt free, not because justice had been served, not because revenge had been fulfilled, but because he finally understood what Mrs. Linton's son must have realized. Too late. That revenge doesn't rebuild anything. It only stops the fire when there's nothing left to burn. Daniel picked up his brush, dipped it in color, and began to paint. The canvas filled with light, no smoke, no ruins, just a sunrise stretching across the horizon. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, Daniel did 2 Dot and somewhere. He hoped Mrs. Linton would know that her warning hadn't just saved his life. It had saved his soul.